All right, today we're going to be doing a little general maintenance and just inspections on the trailer. And I've gone ahead and popped off these two tires, and I'll show you what we get into. So, the first off, just a little background as to what spurned this, other than, just good habits, was the blowout I had the other day. So, driving in on a little job, this tire, was a true blowout. First time I've ever had that happen. It sounded like a gunshot. And I went ahead and limped on into the job, because it was only about another half a mile, so I just turned the flashers on and drove real slow and got her there. So that tire is totally junked. The rim, I think, is okay. It's got one little bend. It's got one little bend right here. Oopsie, sorry about that camera. But I think we can hammer that back out because it's not like kinked or anything too bad. This tire, I don't understand, but this tire has gone completely to hell. And it seems like just in the last couple of weeks, like I've just kind of been paying attention to it. And it's just like it's going really bad, really fast. Obviously it's wearing funny, to where you would think there's maybe something wrong with the bearing, but it may have also been low. I might have been running it low because I'm sitting here. The bearing to me feels fine. It's got a little bit of wiggle, but nothing that I would really worry about. We'll pull this little center cap out and we'll put some grease in there just to be safe, but really I don't think there's anything really wrong with it. It may be that the opposite side tire was low or something, and made this one ride funny. That's my guess. So anyway, we'll get that greased up. This back axle is where my brakes are at. And I've noticed lately when I hit the brakes on the trailer, I feel them engage, but they don't really do anything. So I'm thinking I got to pop that off there and see if I can go get some brake shoes. Let me wrestle with that and get it off there, see what we find. Now on the back here, I'm trying to get into this brake rotor and I had to do a little research. The first video I looked at, it said you could reach inside the, basically this hub cover, I guess that's what you'd call it. It showed you could reach inside of there and pull that castle nut out, but on mine you cannot. There's this little lip. So I don't even know what model or brand of these axles are. I don't know if anything in there tells you USFW4 out ALKO. I don't know if that means anything or not. Anyway, so on mine you have to knock that little hub out first, and you do it just the same as how you do like four-wheel drive hubs on a truck. You just go around with a hammer and just real gentle kind of tap on it and it just pops out. So there's nothing that really holds it in there other than just friction. But now that it's popped out there, now I can get to my cotter key and I'll pull this castle nut off, and that should let me pull the whole hub here off. It's a little different because, like I said, on like on my pickup, you can actually take the tire off, and then once the tire's off, you can just pull the hub right off there, no problem. Like just the tire and the lug nuts is what holds it on there. So anyway, with this one, it's a little different. It looks like it should just slip off, but it doesn't for some reason. I guess the bearing sits behind that hub. But let me go ahead and pull it the rest of the way out of here and we'll take a look at it. Alright, easier said than done, but I'll just show you. So I had to pull the cotter pin and then the castle nut. That castle nut fought me all the way off just because something, a little burr or something. I had to hammer it off till I could grab it with pliers and then spin it off. I couldn't just wing it off by hand. And this washer was behind it on the face of the bearing. The bearing I've already looked at. The bearing looks good. It's still tight. It's not missing any of the rollers or anything. But now and then after that, then your rotor slides off, and you can see mine is chewed all to crap. It's done for, which it's really not gouged out. There's still just a little bit of life on these pads, but not much. These pads they're done for as far as a actual functionality standpoint. But I've got to figure out how to pull them off of there. I don't really know how, but I know I'll figure it out. There's usually on these drum brakes, there's usually just, you know, there's a big spring up here. There's another spring down here. Normally you just have to disconnect those springs with a pair of pliers, and then the actual pads will set right out. So let me work on that. But like I said, while I'm in here, you know, looking around, you want to take a good look at, you know, your actual axle end. Make sure that it's all clean and fine, nothing scarred up. This one actually looks really good, so I'm hopefully I got in here in time. I don't know what that is. That's part of how that's the electric actuator for the brakes, but I've never actually worked on electric brakes before. This is the first for me, so just kind of going through, looking things over, and yeah, troubleshooting, I guess, as we go. So let me see about trying to get these apart and get these off of here, and then I'll be switched over to the other side and get those off, and then we'll be running to town for tires and brake pads. All right, so I got them off there, and I know you guys always like to see how it was done, but I didn't have a good way to set the phone up here to watch. But I pulled the little bottom spring first. It's a soft enough spring that I was able to get a hold of it with the pliers and pull it out of the way. And that let the bottom end of the brake pads basically be independent. But what's neat that I've never seen before is these little locking sort of pins. So these come through the brake pad. They come through that little hole right there. And then there's a spring. And on the spring, you see there's a little slot. So the spring has to be compressed onto that little bolt, onto this little pin. Sorry. The spring has to be compressed onto this little pin and then rotated under compression to lock in place. And once it's in place, it's not going to come undone. So that was kind of interesting to figure out. I grabbed the face of it with the pliers, and then I held my finger here on the back to keep this from rotating. So once those springs were off, then the shoes were able to just come forward and come right off. On the top up here, they just sit and notch right into that. I don't think that's the camber. I think that's just a pivot point, but they just set right on there. And then once the springs are, you know, loose where you can pull them off, I pulled them off together and then just take that big spring out. So I pull the shoe off and then just, which I don't even know what I did with the big spring. I just had it here. The big top spring. Where'd she go? Come on now, it's a big one. Oh, here it is. It's hanging right here on the caliper. It's just hanging there because it's got a clip holding it to that wire. So anyway, you know, very simple mechanical sort of stuff. You just got to figure out how you can do it to unhook these springs. You know, some people say, oh, this stuff's going to fly apart and kill you. I've never had that happen really, but you know, you just got to kind of wrestle with them a little bit to get them off there. I don't know if there's one way that's any better than the other. Anyway, just making sure I don't lose parts and pieces as I go here. This little spring sits behind this, whatever this thing is. I'm just going to call it an actuator. I don't know, it feels like a heavy magnet. I'm thinking that's what it is. I think when you apply electricity, that thing is magnetic basically to push your shoes apart somehow. Anyway, I'm going to try to put these parts and pieces up here on the trailer so I don't lose them, hopefully. And yeah, I'll get around on the other side here and get around on the other side and take the other one off. So we just got into the driver's side, and you know, this is why you do these inspections, people. Because this little thing is supposed to be connected to those wires. So my first, you know, pulled off, I was like, oh, these brake pads are in a little bit better shape. Yeah, that's because they haven't been working. And that's why the other one is in such bad shape, because it's doing all the work. But this piece, it's like those wires are permanently cast into it, maybe? I don't know. I'm gonna have to take it to probably to a trailer dealer and see if that's a piece that I can splice the wires back into, or if I've got to buy the whole thing as a replacement. I don't know. Like I said, it's the first time I've ever worked on electric brakes. But if I do have to buy a replacement, then I'm gonna replace all this wire out of here and go back out the back there, figure out where it comes out of the rotor, and I'll have to, well, there's wire nuts right there, so I'll have to splice it back in. So yeah, anyway, At least there's a splice point already there, which, yeah, I guess wire nuts aren't really, I don't think you're really supposed to use wire nuts in automotive, but whatever, it works. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this tore off here. Now I know I've got to get a few more parts, but we'll get everything cleaned up, disassembled, head to town. All right, so here's the fun of it, or somebody might say it's the rub, whatever, you know. I tore all this apart thinking I would just put new brake shoes in, and then I called a trailer brake, you know, parts dealer, and she said, well, I don't carry just the shoes. She said, I just carry the whole assembly, because to buy just the shoes is $55, and to buy just the magnet, which in this case broke off, is another $40, and she said, I have the whole assembly for $65. So the whole assembly is just, there's 4 nuts here in the back. You just take the whole thing out, just kind of like a hub and bearing assembly. Take that whole thing off the end of the axle, and you can see the heads here. I guess they're just pressed in, kind of like studs. And I guess the whole thing just slides off. Yeah, those are nuts on the back. So the whole thing just comes off the end of the axle. That's actually kind of cool because it gives you the option. You could actually put trailer brakes on this axle too if I wanted to, which I never understood that. Some people always said, you know, hey, dual axle brakes and single axle brakes. Now I know. You can, the brake is a bolt-on assembly onto an otherwise just free spinning axle. So that's neat. So anyway, those bolts feel a little rusty, but hopefully I can pop them off there. I'm going to yank this side off now just so I have a for sure part match to take into the dealer and then go pick up the parts. Well, okay, easy peasy. Those bolts looked a little rusty, but they actually came off super easy, which was nice. The top two, I was able to get a deep socket and my my 1/2-inch drive, my bigger ratchet on, but the bottom side, because of the U-bolts, I couldn't. But luckily I was able to fit a wrench in there just fine. Like I said, it's a smaller wrench. It's 11/16 on the nuts, but I didn't fit my, I couldn't fit my big deep 1/2-inch drive. But I was able to get a regular wrench and break them loose by hand. And then I had a 3/8 drive, it's just, you know, a little smaller, I don't even know where I put it, shorter ratchet right there. So anyway, I was able to get them apart just fine. Took the wire nuts loose and the whole assembly just comes right off. So yeah, in the future, you guys will know this now if you're working on the same sort of trailer anyway. Don't even bother, well, I guess, let's see. You still have to take off all the hub and everything, but you don't have to take the springs and all the brake pads and all that sort of stuff apart. You just, once you get the hub and everything out of your way, you just take those 4 nuts off and the whole assembly comes off. So let's go to town and get parts and we'll get the new one put back on. So here's our new brake assembly, and you know, when I called the trailer parts place, she was like, oh yeah, that's a 10-inch assembly, no problem, I got everything you need right here. And then I walked in with the other piece just to match it, and she said, ooh, I don't think I have that. I'm like, well, doggone it. But we kind of took some measurements off what I had and versus what they had, and I think it's gonna fit. We're about to find out. He said I could bring it back if it didn't, but as long as my rotor, bingo, fits over it, we're fine. I may have to adjust it just a little bit, but that's what this little adjustment down here is for. So we're gonna get this slip back on there. I told him I'd try to keep it all clean and, you know, make sure it all worked. And he said as long as I could bring it back, you know, fully intact and clean, if it didn't work, he would return it. So, but I'm thinking I'm not gonna have to. We're gonna get this thrown on there and make sure everything's turning smooth and feels good. And hopefully do the other side, get everything put back together. It's got some instructions here on it. I don't know if they're anything too fancy. Install the new brake assembly, old hardware, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I forgot to get a new cotter pin or cotter key. See if I can find one of those laying around, or a good piece of heavy wire. But yeah, pretty much just plug and play. Just bolt it on there and hook your wires up. Should be good to go. Okay, so we got the new brake assembly bolted on. Super easy. The wires just stick out the back here. Maybe you can see those 2 little wire nuts. I already got those hooked up. There's a little factory clip that's already on there to hold it in place. What are you doing, Caroline? You're not holding it. Tip it down. Tip it down. Right there. Hold it right there so you can see the whole thing, okay? So we got that on. We got the inside of our rotor cleaned up here where it sits. And so our rotor's just going to slip right on over the middle of it. And our bearing here is going to go right back in the middle where it was. Try to make sure if you get any little bits of dirt or anything in your grease, get that out of there. But ultimately, it slips right back in, and then the rest of it is just reverse of how it came off. So we had the bearing, And then we had our washer. All of my parts are smoking hot because they're laying up here in the sun. But we're going to clean our washer up here. And it just sets on there. And this is why I told you guys I always lay my parts out in reverse order, how I take them off. That way I know when I'm coming back together with it, I know which piece goes next. Now we got our castle nut here. It's got some little hay and debris stuck on it because there's hay all over the trailer. We'll get our castle nut cleaned up.
There's a beef flying along.
There is. Let's get that castle nut started on there. Oh, look at you getting down in the action. We're going to put that all the way on until it's just handy. You don't want to lock it down tight because then it puts drag on your rotor. If your castle nut's too tight, then your rotor doesn't turn easy. It's doing kind of an out of balance thing. You hear it, how it kind of something's a little off. It may just be those pads aren't quite even. But that'll be okay. Those will fix themselves with time. So I don't really know that I need to make any adjustment. But we're gonna get our cotter key back in there, get our hub cover back on. We're gonna grease it real good, and we'll be done on this side. Well, there's the finished product. Looks the same on the other side, so I'll just talk about this side. But new hub and bearing assemblies, or brake assemblies. Stupid easy to just plug and play. 2 wire nuts, 4 bolts, on and off. 4 nuts, on and off. Really easy. I need to go through the rest of the trailer and check my lighting. I feel like I probably have a few loose wires or broken wires. Maybe I could fix up today. It wouldn't hurt to just kind of put the trailer all back together. I mean, I'm riding dirty and haven't renewed the license on it in over a year, so I suppose it wouldn't hurt to at least have working lights. But at least I feel better now about the brakes and the tires. The brakes should both be working fine. 2 brand new tires on the back here because my tires were getting pretty bad. So I got 2 brand new ones. I put them both on the braking axle, put the best of the best on the front floating axle, and the best of the worst goes on the front as the spare. But yeah, that's it. All done. I'm really happy with it, all in time. I mean, again, you know, I always like to mention to you guys how much time it really took me to do this versus, you know, taking it to a shop and, you know, quote, paying a professional. Let's see, it was, I don't know, maybe an hour to take the brake hubs on and off. I would say, I mean, I'm using a 4-way wrench, I don't even an impact. If you got a pneumatic impact, zip, 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 on all those bolts, you're talking maybe 15 minutes per axle half, per side. So in an hour, if you had the parts, if you stopped by the trailer place ahead of time, and you had the parts, buy your new brake components, yeah, an hour to get all this done. I did have the one advantage with the tractor that I just picked the back of the trailer up with the tractor versus have to jack it up. But seriously, just incredibly easy. At the time that you would spend taking it to a dealer or a repair shop and waiting around to sign papers and do all that to have them do it, you just soon do it yourself, which makes me happy. Anyway, I haven't tested it. Need to hook it up to the truck, I guess, and just take it for a little ride down the road and manually engage the brakes and see how they feel, but I don't have any reason to believe that they don't work. I'm happy with it.